TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift Farms' emerging top sire Into Mischief, whose 2017 Kentucky Derby contenders include multiple Grade 1 winner Practical Joke and undefeated Southwest Stakes winner One Liner.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, the story of the weekend has to be Mastery. He looked beautiful in the San Felipe, unfortunately pulled up right after the wire. Yeah. Spoke with Bob Baffert, the horse is doing well. He's already had surgery, but unfortunately he's gonna come off of the Derby trail now. So now we look at the San Felipe in a little different light. You have to say who's running behind him. Tell me what you think of the race.
Well, what's interesting about Mastery is it really is kind of the same thing I saw in the Low Sal Futurity, John, to where they came to him at the top of the stretch. You wonder if he was going to be in for a battle. I think IRAP came to him that day in this Low Sal Futurity, and I knew it wasn't a great field that day, and it really took Mastery a while to get going, to put those horses away. So I really questioned him a little bit in his two-turn debut. Same thing here. Iliad comes to him. Mm-hmm. Gormley had nothing once they hit the far turn. I don't know what happened to him. Very disappointing performance from Gormley. And it looked like Iliad may have had an opportunity to make a run at Mastery, but he separates. He just finds more gears, John. You saw him cruise under the wire, totally under wraps by the time he got under the wire. And unfortunately, on the gallop out, obviously that left front goes off. Mike Smith very diligently gets off the horse as fast as possible, probably saves some damage. So good to have an experienced rider there. But boy, what a hit to the 3-year-old division. For him to cruise under the wire like that and keep finding the way he did, I mean, here's a horse that could have ascended to the top of a lot of lists after that. And he was already at the top of some. Bob Baffert, he was probably at the top of his list. He's been touting this horse since he was 2. He got a 105 buyer. Very impressive by Mastery, even though I don't think he was tested a ton in there. Again, we talked about that. He didn't really have to come from off the pace. He was allowed to get the lead, and we've seen that in his performances. And when they come to him, he finds more. So we don't know how good Mastery is yet when he's had to be tested in terms of rating or maybe coming from the second flight. Unfortunately, we won't be able to find that out until later on in the year. And I tell you what, with screws and a process like that, John, I mean, he may not make it to the Breeders' Cup. We may be looking at maybe the Pegasus World Cup or something in 2018 for Mastery now, unfortunately.
All right, well, let's go to South Florida and let's talk about the Tampa Bay Derby. This has really become a race that's important on the Derby trail. Joel, you like Tapwrit going into this race. He stuck his nose in the dirt whenever he broke. For me, he got shuffled back, I thought, into a position where he was, maybe not supposed to be. But Joel, he looked like he was much the best in here.
Well, he's notoriously been a head case, and in particular in the gate, they've really had to work with him. So you saw a brief stumble there, and he recovered quickly, but he's a big colt. Takes him a while to get going. He's not particularly quick. So you're right, he was out-footed and he was shuffled back a little bit going in the first turn. But fortunately, there was enough contentious pace in front of him and the track was playing fair that you saw him prove much the best. He looms up here and he's already got the lead and he's separating from State of Honor here. And I really start looking behind him and see who else is running here because it's a good performance. They set a stakes record, John, but the track was fast. Stanford broke the track record earlier on the day, so that tells you all you need to know about how the track was playing. I thought Beasley ran pretty well. I mean, here's a horse that was extremely wide on the course, shipping to Tampa for the first time, took the turn wide, ran extremely longer than everybody else. And so he was a little flat in the stretch, but still ran in there with that group for 3rd, 4th, 5th in there. So Beasley's a sneaky horse, I think, going forward. I don't think he's a Derby type horse yet. He's going to be a little slower developing. I think maybe in the summertime you could look for Beasley maybe showing his best in there. I think there's talent there. But really out of that race, No Dozing was more forwardly placed in there. Yep. Still had no finish. John, I actually thought he was poised to run a big race where he was sitting going down the backstretch, no finish. So I think No Dozing now is not a serious Triple Crown candidate. I think he's going to be off the Derby trail. And really the only horse I'm taking out of that race is Tapwrit. And the question mark for me is going to be, what are they going to do with him? Because Todd Pletcher likes time in between races. However, this is a progressive colt. Right. He clearly is big enough. He can handle racing. He's mentally developing as he runs. I mean, you see there, for him to be able to close and really, make up a lot of ground there. That hasn't been the trip that he's had, so far in his career. He's been more forwardly placed, but he was able to overcome a slow start, like you said, rally and be very impressive in here. So he looks like a Derby-type colt. Will he run again, or will Pletcher elect to train him up off a long layoff like he did Destin last year after Destin won the Tampa Bay Derby?
Well, it's going to be interesting now to see what you do with the TCI top 10. With everything that's happened with Gormley running bad, of course, with Mastery coming off. Now you see Tapwrit. It'd be interesting to see what you do with TCI top 10.
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting, John. Let's go over and look at this week's top 10. Obviously, Mastery has to come off. Very disappointing there. Gormley, I'm taking him off as well. I mean, to run poor in the Breeders' Cup, I gave him a pass. To run poor with the trip he got this past weekend as well as he was training, I have to think something's going on with Gormley. He has to fall off the list for me. Everybody moves up. That's the way I do things. J-Boy Zecco, who was right teetering on making the top 10, he moves in that 9 spot now for me. And John, I'm going to put Unique Bella in that 10 spot because, again, a couple different things in play here. We're running out of horses, A, but B, she's a talent. She has the physicality of the Colts. And I think this is a much different scenario for Unique Bella this year than what Songbird faced last year.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Songbird. I mean, this is the same trainer as Songbird. He obviously knows how to handle these top-class fillies.
Yeah.
You know, the owner last year was who did not want to run Songbird in the Kentucky Derby, even though everybody was crying out, put her in the Derby, put her in the Derby.
And
so
she got hurt anyway, so
it
played out itself.
But they were not going to run her in the Derby.
Right.
But, you know, this is a different ownership group. You know, it'll be interesting to see when he looks at this filly and you kind of see what's happening with those Derby horses. Man, I mean, I would be interested in seeing if they would take a shot with her.
She's a big physical filly, John. She's extremely talented. One would argue now with Mastery on the sidelines and some of these other horses, you know, taking it back. I mean, we saw Classic Empire work. That's encouraging.
Yep.
But let's face it, if he has one hiccup between now and the Bluegrass, he's off the Derby trail. So you start looking at it, and I wrote down my list of 2-year-olds that I thought were bona fide top-level elite Derby-type horses coming into the year. As 2-year-olds, Classic Empire, we talked about him. McCracken missed his prep race, even though he appears to be doing well. Not this time, retired. And Mastery, now off the Triple Crown trail. So if you're Jerry Hollendorfer and Don Alberto, and you see a big physical daughter, Tapwrit, you know, one that's probably going to get the distance, showing that she could be as brilliant and as good as the Colts. You know, Don Alberto is an emerging young owner in the game. What are his aspirations? Does he want to win the Kentucky Derby? Does he want to take a shot with a filly like this? I mean, you could argue that now with Baffert having Abel Tasman, that the Santa Anita Oaks coming up is really may not turn out to be that much stronger than the Santa Anita Derby. Why not run in the Santa Anita Derby for a big pot, grade 1 still, try to get those points, and just see if the Derby's an option. If it's not, you can always go to the Oaks. But I put her in that top 10 now, John, because I think if you're Hollendorfer and you realize Mastery and some of these horses on the sidelines, maybe that window of opportunity is there to take a shot with Unique Bella.
All right, well, let's talk about your number 1 because we're going to see him in action this weekend. You know, he's been sitting up there for quite a few weeks. We've been waiting for this horse and anticipating. He's been always aimed towards this race. You know, it's interesting. WinStar does not have one liner back in here, but they do bring American Anthem over.
Yeah.
Joel, I'm really anticipating seeing your number 1 horse on TCI Top 10 run. Tell me, what do you think about his chances?
Well, I love him in here. And I mean, who wouldn't love him in here? Everything Bob Baffert sends in for these prep races at Oaklawn, every one of them seemed to win if you just go back and look at the last 5 or 6 years, John. I mean, it's a pretty proven thing. He's going to be a short price favorite in here with Mike Smith coming in, and he's a progressive colt. Again, the reason I like him is he has all the upside, you know, with the right connections, a horse that's going to love a classic distance. He's got, to me, a tactical style and a physicality. And again, being a Mayfoal, it's all upside with American Anthem. He's not a great workhorse. You know, there's some things that you don't like to see, but most of it's mental in the morning time. His last work with More Spirit I thought was very good. More Spirit's a good workhorse. More Spirit's a horse that, you know, ran pretty well last time out, and he's going to run the Essex, and he's a solid handicap division type horse. American Anthem struggled a little bit to get by him in there, but he's not a great workhorse, and he's a bona fide classic horse. So I think American Anthem's going to punch through this weekend, show that he deserves to be a top 3 and for me a top 1 Kentucky Derby contender, particularly with Mastery out. But it's an interesting race, John. If we start looking at this Rebel field, I mean, they're giving away 900,000.
Yep.
So, you know, you get 11 horses in here, and really the only throw out to me is Sonneteer, the maiden, and I can find something to like about every other horse in this race.
Well, I'm interested here too. I see another winner of a race, the Robert Lewis, and that's Royal Mo. I know you weren't thrilled with his performance in there, but they're shipping him over as well. It'll be interesting to see what he does in this race.
Well, you want to talk about talent and upside. That's Royal Mo too. The problem with him is I think he's a little more one-paced. You know, I don't think he beat much last time out in the Bob Lewis. I don't really think he's a fast enough horse to be a lead type horse. I think he's going to have more of a stalking style as he gets in these pace scenarios that are more legit. And this pace scenario in here ought to be more legit. I mean, you have Silver Bullion breaking from the rail, should show some speed. Uncontested is as one way to go. We talked about that. He'll be on the lead. And Malagacy. Todd Pletcher thinks this son of Shackelford is talented, but thinks he's probably a sprinter. And they're just trying to stretch him out here to see if he can be a Derby type horse. But if you watch him work on XBTV, he's very fast, John. It's kind of hard for me to see him stretching his speed out. I think Pletcher is pretty accurate about what he thinks his colt is, but he's so fast. You're going to see him probably with uncontested setting a legitimate pace in here, John, and that'll really set it up for a lot of horses. And certainly, you know, when you look at the horse you mentioned, Royal Mo, I think he and American Anthem are going to have similar type trips. They're going to be in that second flight stalking. Bob Baffert didn't like to get his horses way out of it. You know him. He likes to send them into the turn and give them an opportunity to finish in the lane. He's not going to have any horses coming from way out of it. So expect some tactical ability from American Anthem, and certainly Royal Mo has that speed as well. But I think there's a couple interesting long shot closers in here, John. I mean, looking at Lee, Silver Dust, 2 local horses, 2 closers, came out of that Southwest Stakes. They didn't get the track set up that day the way it was playing to be able to close, but now second off the layoff in the 3-year-old year, I think both of them have some talent and have the opportunity to, you know, I'm not sure if they can beat American Anthem, but maybe get on the board here and set them up for the Arkansas Derby, going a little further, third off the layoff, and maybe show that they can be late developing Derby type horses. So to me, this is an interesting field, and we didn't even talk about Petrov yet.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be your third choice in the race. You know, I thought he ran pretty well last time out, and again, he looks like a progressive type colt too. So this is an interesting race, I think, top to bottom, with Sonneteer being really the only horse that doesn't belong, and the rest of them have quite a bit of talent in here, and I think it's going to be a key race.
I mean, here's the thing. It's the middle of March, getting towards the end of March. I mean, you're running out of times to have little hiccups. I mean, it's time to kind of show up and really win these races. So
yeah, no doubt, man.
You know, it's going to be tough for a horse like, you know, what happened with McCracken. They had time. They could take that and say, hey, listen, we're going to give him a little bit of time and then bring him back. You're getting to the point now, these horses are going to have to start winning these races to get going to the Derby.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And the key thing for me with American Anthem is I think he'll win, but he doesn't have to win. I mean, like I said, with as much talent or potential talent as there is in here, if he were to get in some trouble or the pace scenario be awkward for him and him find himself in an awkward spot in the race, I don't think a mile and a 16th is quite his distance. Again, big physical son of Bodemeister, AP mare, screams a mile and a quarter, and I think his best days, again, are in front of him, not particularly this weekend. So I think he can win this weekend. He'll be odds on to do so. I'm looking ahead still with American Anthem, and to me, he just needs to run well. He doesn't have to win to be number 1 on my list. He just needs to run well.
All right, thank you, Joel. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll recap the Rebel, and we'll see what happens with the TCI Top 10 number 1.